What's up? Welcome back. I'm sick right now. Sick of your excuses. Yeah, it's about time someone said it. No, but just because I'm sick doesn't mean that I'm not going to crap out some quality content for you fellas. A couple of you asked for more Syntakt content from the last video that I made, and I couldn't agree more. We're gonna look at like 5 pro tips on how to make your Syntakt patterns less boring and more dynamic. Before we get started, just wanted to remind you that I have a Patreon for just $2 a month. This episode is going to have the full jam track available for download on there, as well as the system files for this track. And I'm also going to make a sample pack of all of the sounds that I made to make this song. Without further ado, let's get to the Syntakt. So to start off with, I've got these chords. You can see the settings here. Pretty simple, kind of boring. And I think that's one of the common complaints that I see about the Syntakt is that the chord machine is a little bit limited. And I agree, if you don't get creative and kind of spice it up with some tricks, it can be a little boring. So what we're going to do, I'm going to actually add this separate chord sound I made to it. So it's the same chord. It's the major add 9, minor add 9. I don't know, whatever. But it's a different inversion, which you can control the inversion with this knob here. And it's got a different wavetable. So we've got that chord pattern with this one. And so we can just do function copy, and that copies the track. And then we just go to track 7, and then we're going to go to function paste, and it's going to paste the track. So now our 2 chord tracks are playing the same thing. It's still not the most interesting thing in the world, but that's okay. In our LFO settings on our chord machine, we're going to set the LFO destination to the waveform, and then we've got our wave as the sample and hold wave, and we're just going to up that depth a little bit. I don't know if we want it to go too crazy, but see how it's getting that kind of variety just by cycling through the chords. And we can actually copy just the LFO page. So if we just hold LFO, copy, it says copy page LFO 1, and then we're going to go to track 7, and then we're going to paste LFO page 1 to track 7. Dope. If you watched my last video on the Syntakt, one of my tips was to layer kick drum sounds, to use 2 tracks to make 1 kick drum, to make it more loud and cut through the mix more and just have more dynamics. So that's kind of the same principle that we're doing here for this first trick. I think this pattern could be made more interesting. This is, I guess, kind of our second tip, is to use what Elektron calls Trigless Trigs, which sounds overly complicated, but it kind of makes sense. When we go to record mode, you can see that there's these tracks that are red, and those are your notes. They're going to trigger your notes, edit any information associated with that note. And so if we hold function and we put one that's yellow, that one's not going to play a note, but we can change the parameters. What that allows us to do is it allows us to modify the sound in an interesting way without having a note play. And so what I'm going to do here is we're going to take this one, and you can just hold it down, and you can modify any parameter, and it's going to remember that parameter change for that step only. So that they call that parameter locking. So for this one, we're going to go to the amp, and we're going to turn the volume down, the reverb down, and the delay down. And so our intention here is to create a stop where it's going to cut off the audio. So that way it's not ringing out too much. And it's also going to give us a pattern with a little bit more kind of movement in it. And so we can copy this here, copy, and then paste. So you just hold it, copy it, paste it. So now here's our pattern. Hold on. Not a big change, actually, because we have to copy the track, because we're doing 2 layered on top of each other for the chords. So then we'll paste the track here, and so we've got our stops here. So all right, so I'm thinking this track is gonna have kind of a like high tempo drum and bass, glitchy IDM, Aphex Twin, whatever stupid genre name you want to call it. So we're gonna put kind of a drum and bass track on it. So let me just lay down a really simple line for that really quick. And it's pretty good. It's a classic beat. Nothing wrong with that. But we can make it more interesting. That's the whole goal here. So what we're gonna do is, just to start off simple, on our kick drum, we've got these notes playing here. And the first thing I wanna do is turn down the velocity of these, because they're not gonna be like, they're not the accent notes, right? The second thing I wanna do with these is I want to make this play every other bar. Okay, so that's gonna essentially like double the pattern that we have, because we've got some diversity as it repeats now. So and then with our snare, we're going to add some ghost notes to the snare. And what a ghost note is when a drummer plays the snare and plays a note that's quiet and not on the accented step, just to fill in the kind of like space and texture. That's a ghost note. We'll put one here. And I think we'll put 2 here, and then we're going to put another one there, and we'll put one here, but we're not going to copy that pattern exactly, just so it breaks up a little bit. So with that, it's kind of a lot, right? So we can hold down our ghost notes here, and we can turn the velocity down. And another thing we can do is we can make our amp envelope a little shorter, so it's going to be a little bit snappier on those notes. So let's do that to all of them. All right, so that's less aggressive, but we don't want it to repeat every single time, right? So we can really do a lot with the trig parameter, the probabilities. So for this one, I'm thinking let's make that one below 50, like 41% should work. And for this one, let's go for a similar percentage, maybe a little bit more often for this one. I want this one to trigger every time this one triggers. I don't want this one to have its own probability, because I feel like those 2 hits go together, right? So what we can do is we can go to pre without the line on top of it, and that's going to link it to this one. So this one's got a 50% chance of triggering, and every time it triggers, this one will too, and every time it does not, this one will not. And then these 2 here, we're going to make these fill. And so what fill's going to do is when we hold this button right here, that's going to trigger our fill pattern. So let's see what that sounds like. Let's add just a little bit of diversity to the hi-hats here. I think we're going to add some notes right here, and we're going to make these fill only also. So no probabilities in the hi-hats. That'll just keep us having a steady rhythm regardless of any accents that get played by any other percussion parts. Nothing different, but if I hold fill, all right, sounds pretty good. We're going to turn the velocity down on those also, because they're just accents. They're not the star of the show, so to speak. Okay, so let me add just a little bit more to fill out the beat. We're gonna have this hi-hat, and I'm not showing you how I made all of the sounds because that would take forever, but I'm using some tricks like randomizing the tune to humanize the hi-hats that are in my last video on the Syntakt, and you should go check that out. All right, so we're grooving now, we're grooving. I think we need a bass line. So we've got this bass sound that I've already made, and we're gonna lay down a bass line to go with this, but we're gonna use some of our same tricks to make it more interesting. If we hit play and record at the same time, then that lets us put in notes live. And then we can also turn on a metronome if we hold function and press pattern or metronome, as it says in the subfunction. I don't think I mentioned this earlier, but our chord pattern we have here is playing these last two notes that are out of key. It's playing those chords only once every 2 loops. Does that make sense? So it's playing the out of key notes once, and then it plays a loop without it. And so we want our bass to match that. So we go to these last 2 notes, and we're going to make these play 1, skip 1, basically. It's time for a cough drop. That's obnoxious. I gotta spit this out. It ain't working. What a disaster. So our next pro tip is to use Randomize Effectively. I didn't know that the Syntakt had a randomize feature until like 3 days ago, but it's really cool. So the way that randomize works in the Syntakt is you hold down any parameter page, any of these that you want to randomize, and then you just hit yes to randomize it. What I want to attempt to do with it is to get that kind of like rapid, like stream of consciousness IDM sort of thing, you know? I don't know. You know what I'm talking about when it sounds like you're fucking hitting a fax machine with a hammer. You know what I'm saying? So we want to get that kind of vibe. And I think random is probably the best way to do it. And it took me a minute to figure out how to sort of randomize each step. And I don't know if this is the most efficient way to do that. And so if you have a better way to do that, please let me know in the comments. But for now, we're just going to lay down a quick, I don't know, just a random pattern. Okay. Hold on. Let's shut everything else up. So it's fine. It's a stick clicking, right? Also worth noting that we've got a filter on here. If we hold synth and we randomize it, it randomizes everything. It randomizes every step that we've put down. And if we go to record and we hold a step and then we randomize or hit the button to randomize it, it doesn't randomize it. And I tried for the life of me to figure out a way to do that. And here's the best way I figured out. So we randomized the sound. So on this first one, we're going to hold that step down and then we'll just click every knob in and it's going to save those parameters. Then we randomize it again and you can see it's got those parameters saved from what they are now. So then if we do that on every single step, randomize, click. Let's see what we've got. Hopefully it's something we can work with. Okay, it's kind of weird and it would get boring really, really fast and get repetitive really, really fast. But I think we can work with it. I think we can work with it. Bear with it for a second. Let's go to record. First of all, let's turn our probability down. Maybe a little below 50. This at least spices it up a little bit, so we're not hearing the same exact pattern every single time. So on the Syntakt, we've got this function here to retrig. And retrig is just going to hit that a bunch of times. It's kind of like a ratchet, basically, right? Integral to the like glitchy IDM sound is crazy ratchets, okay? So we're just going to grab a step here. We'll grab number 1, and all we have to do is just hit up to turn on our retrig menu. So we'll turn that on and then we'll just keep the rate where it's at. Let's do that with a few of them. And we're going to change the value every time. So we've got different rates. Let's see what this sounds like. So now we're getting somewhere. We still want another element of randomness to it and another element of constant change. So if we go to our LFO, we've got it set up with a sample and hold waveform. And then we're going to do the destination for the first one to panning, and then we'll max that out. Do our second random LFO to the delay send, and that's also going to be maxed out. So now let's hear that in context with everything else that we have so far. So I've got this melody track that I made with the Bits engine. And I think it sounds pretty cool. It's kind of got a lo-fi sound to it a little bit, but we want more randomness. That's the whole goal, is to just make everything feel super alive and super moving, right? So I've got another random LFO set up. If you can't tell already, random LFOs on this thing are your key to super dope sound design. Okay, so for our first LFO, we're going to do sample rate reduction, which is this control here, and that's going to make it sort of lo-fi randomly. So if we swap over to our other LFO, we're going to make this one the waveform. So that's going to change our sound quite a bit also, right? So let's lay down a little melody. Okay, that's sounding good, but we want to change up our melody just like everything else. We want to stretch it, get the most out of it that we can. And so what we're going to do, this is the second bar. Here on this step, I'm going to trigger another note to play, the step after, okay? And we're going to make this one an E flat, which is a D sharp. And then we're going to do the same thing here. We're going to go here and here, where I'm going to, what's this? That's a B flat. So I'm going to make this one a G and make this one an F. Okay, this on its own is going to sound terrible. So what we're going to do is we're going to make these two steps, play the first one, skip the second one, right? We've done that a couple of times now. And we're going to do the same thing here. Play the first one, skip the second one. So we want this following step to play every time this one doesn't. So we hold that one down, and we're going to go to pre with a line over the top of it. And so that means when the previous step does not play, then this one will play. But there's still the problem of this is going to trigger after, which is going to create an irregular rhythm, which might be cool, but we want this step to play here, right? So we want the same rhythm of the melody, but we want the notes to be different. So we can hold these steps down, and the left and right arrows will adjust the micro timing. And if we scoot it all the way over, it's basically playing on top of this first step here. Okay, so let's see what that sounds like. I actually want to flip these. I want this to be F, and I want this to be G. Okay, so that creates a little bit more tension that second time around, so it's not just the same monotonous rhythm every time. We get a little tension and a little release, right? We get spicy note, then we get happy note, right? So I think this is missing a little bit of high end. And so what we're going to do is we're going to use the last record type, which we have not used yet, and we're going to make an arpeggio with this kind of FM bell sound that I've got here. So for our chords, it's playing like a minor seventh with an add 9 or something. I don't know. So we're going to play that chord on top of it, arpeggiated. You'll see what I mean. But the way we're going to add this, if we hit stop and record at the same time, we're in step recording mode now. Okay. And so what that means is we're on step 1. And so every note we play is going to be put in to every step, right? Let's punch in our notes. So let's see what that sounds like. I'm going to mute some stuff because this track's kind of quiet. Okay, that's absurdly fast. Way too fast. So we can slow that down. If we hold function and hit page, then we're brought to our the track length for that track. We're going to set the scale down to half speed, so it's going to play half as fast, right? Twice as long. So we've got a chord change. So we want to have our arpeggiator match that. So I only put in the first chord. But what we can do is we can go to our second page here. So this second half is going to be in that different chord or that different key, however you want to think about it. So we can just hold down like every note very awkwardly like this. And then we can just bump that up to G. Let's take it down an octave. Okay, that sounds pretty good. I already have an LFO, just a sine wave, changing the panning left and right, which you can hear if you're wearing headphones. But we also want to give it some random because everything's got random on this whole track. So we're going to do random volume. So we've got a cool beat kind of put together on this pattern. There's a lot of dynamics. There's a lot of movement. So I wanted to end this video talking about some techniques and tips you can use to perform on the Syntakt. But I don't think that I have time for that. Let me know in the comments if you want to see a part 2 where I just sort of dedicate it all to looking at performing live on this thing. If you want to see more Syntakt content or more content on something in general, let me know. Like and subscribe, all of that stuff. Thanks for hanging out until the end. And I'm just going to kind of jam around on this track that we made. Peace.